Hi everyone. My name is Dylan Scanlon and I'm joined with my colleague Miamh Kennedy here, who will introduce ourselves in a minute. But we're here to speak to you today about our presentation, Rethink, Reimagine and Redesign Teaching, Learning and Assessment, Lessons Learned and Moving Forward from Remote Academic Experience. So my name is Dylan Scanlon. As I said, I just finished my PhD at the University of Limerick on curriculum design and curriculum policy. I also work with the National Student Engagement Programme here in Ireland, and I'm a student associate with the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning. Over to you, Miamh.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Miamh Kennedy. I am a second year PhD student in the School of Law at the University of Limerick, and my research area is experiential legal education. Like Dylan, I'm also a student associate for the National Forum of the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning.
Okay, so where are we in this teaching and learning space? Just to give a bit of context, I suppose. It can be argued that we were operating in the remote teaching and learning space, which was a result of a very fast pivot to the online world as a result of the campuses closing due to the pandemic. It's important to state that the remote emergency teaching and learning is not the same as the online or blended teaching and learning space, and there are clear differences in the way these learning experiences are designed. We're probably now in the online teaching and learning space whereby we've moved here to this online world and we had more time to reflect on how we can teach and how we can learn online. As campuses are likely to open in September, we'll probably move to the more of a blended teach and learning space. And we are suggesting that we can take the lessons learned from the remote, from the remote and online teaching and learning space and apply them to that blended space, provide a more meaningful, relevant and worthwhile learning experience. We believe we all need to take a glass half full outlook in this online teaching and learning context. We need to view this as an opportunity for teaching and learning in higher education, and a much needed opportunity at that. For teachers, in moving to a more blended learning environment, we need to rethink and redesign how we're going to teach and what we're going to teach. A rethinking of our technological, pedagogical content knowledge in an online and blended learning environment. For students, we need to rethink and redesign how we're going to learn. We're going to be learning in different ways, on different platforms, and in different means. Enhancing student engagement, acting as co-creators and partners in the learning experience has never been so important, and the COVID-19 influence has heightened the potentialities of these opportunities. I'll now hand you over to Miamh, who will talk us through our first lesson learned from last year and how we're going to move forward with that.
Perfect. So the first thing that we're going to look at is assessments and what we've learned in respect of assessments during education during the pandemic. So the pandemic has been a turbulent time, to say the least, especially in the journey from emergency remote learning to online learning, as Dylan very clearly explained. Despite the obvious challenges, this experience has encouraged students and educators to look at our previous mode of study and assessment and make some necessary changes. The past year and a half saw a major shift from the traditional summative end-of-term assessments to new, innovative and adapting assessment methods. This mode of assessment was typically the most utilised as it is easy to roll out and time efficient. However, it is often the less preferred method by students as it carries a lot of pressure. It does not always demonstrate sufficient level of learning and understanding. Students typically rely on the element of risk-taking and rote learning, and there is little opportunity for feedback or further learning. Education during a pandemic welcomed new ways of assessing student learning. While some of these assessment methods may have been in use prior to the pandemic, I'm sure they were new to some educators or courses, or they were adapted to suit the emergency remote learning environment and our new online learning model. Education during COVID-19 welcomed a heavier reliance on formative assessments, and as Forbes magazine stated, formative assessment is reshaping education during COVID-19, and this could not be more accurate. Educators are swapping out 100% summative exams for open book assessments, multiple choice quizzes, continuous assessments, virtual presentations, and so much more. These methods are encouraging student engagement. They allow the student to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding, and most importantly, it provides the opportunity for the student to receive feedback from their peers or from their educator and to further their learning. I'll pass you back to Dylan now, who's going to speak to you about blending formative assessment and summative assessment and how we can use these assessment methods in a post-COVID learning environment.
Great, thanks, Miamh. So moving forward, we are arguing, as Niamh pointed out, that teachers need to blend summative and formative assessment. It shouldn't be one or the other. A means of doing this is to use summative assessment in a formative manner. I'll now provide you an example of how we have done this on a module or a unit through one of the modules I teach on here at the University of Limerick. So here on your screen is a 12-week blended learning module. The 12 weeks are broken into 4 blocks, as you see at the top of your screen, and 3 weeks in each block. Well, I could probably spend the whole presentation talking you through this diagram. I'm going to bring your attention to the very bottom, which is the assessment piece. There are 4 assessments, 1 assessment per each block, which are 4 blocks, and the whole 4 come to 100% assessment. As you can see, the first block here on the bottom left hand is worth 15%. The next 2 are worth 25%, and the final one is worth 35%. This is done intentionally. The student will get a lot of feedback on their first blog, and this feedback will inform their next blog, and so on. The feedback of the summative assessment informs the next in a very formative manner. What happens in this case is the grades go up and the feedback goes down as the blogs progress. And this is a perfect example of what we're trying to argue, using summative assessment in a formative way. I'll now hand you back over to Niamh to go through the lesson we learned in the teaching space.
Thanks, Dylan. So as Dylan mentioned, our second key message is teaching and what we have learned in the past year and a half. So not only did the pandemic force us to rethink our assessment methods, but also it encouraged us to change the way in which we deliver our content and our course material. Emergency remote learning and online learning meant that students will be learning in different ways and on different platforms and in different means. So our delivery methods needed to accommodate this change. So now that we've moved from face-to-face lectures to online classes, it is important that student engagement remains vital to the learning process. The use of synchronous and asynchronous classes have replaced the formal face-to-face lecture. Some educators might record their classes and upload them to their educational platform so that the student can attend in their own time, while other educators may insist and encourage virtual attendance at the class's scheduled time. For both of these delivery methods, there are some blockages for student interaction, asking questions, and keeping the student motivated throughout the course. For various reasons, students may be less inclined to turn on their microphone or their camera, or even ask questions. So how can we ensure that the student is engaging with the material and concentrating throughout the classes? The use of breakout rooms have been a great motivational tool, as it allows students to meet and discuss with their peers, which is the closest thing they can have to sitting in the classroom or lecture hall with their peers. Students may feel more comfortable asking questions in these smaller groups. They may be able to provide teaching or support to their fellow students, which will further their own learning and understanding. And also, this short break from listening to the lecture will allow the student to refocus. Similarly, the use of e-activities can again keep the students focused and engaged, but also gives them an opportunity to reflect and to demonstrate their learning by solo work or group collaboration. I'll now pass you over to Dylan, who will speak to you about the teaching methods that we can adapt into a post-COVID learning environment.
So moving forward, we argue again that we need to adopt and adapt student-centered pedagogies. Rather than focus on these pedagogies for my section here, I'm going to talk you through an approach which encapsulates all these student-centered pedagogies, that being online learning communities. We believe that student-centered pedagogical approaches and the associated learning can be utilised and enhanced through the notion of online learning communities. In teaching through a collaborative online learning community, the teacher adopts a facilitator role and collaborates with the students in co-designing the learning experience. This shifts the responsibility and ownership from the teacher to the student in a student-centered approach to learning, where students operate and work together through peer learning in an online environment. In this manner, students become co-creators of their own learning experience. As Robertson and Barbara comment here on your screen, when students are encouraged to work in groups, they create learning communities. Through these strong networks, students share what they know of each other and support each other in the learning. This approach can construct, develop, and foster meaningful engagement in teaching and learning. I'll now hand you back over to Niamh for our lesson learned from the learning space.
Thanks, Dylan. So finally, we have our third and final key message, which is learning. So the pandemic has presented both students and educators with many difficulties and overnight changes, and this has definitely been a learning curve for each and every one of us. Despite these challenges, it has brought about some welcome changes that have and can continue to improve the quality of education that we provide. The pandemic and the shift to online learning has raised awareness to the difficulties that students are facing. This may include technological issues, work-life balance issues, and even mental health issues. The learner-educator relationship has become a very empathetic one. So too has the overall virtual classroom environment, as everyone there is continuously adapting to the new normal of online and remote learning and the various challenges that come with it, especially those very much outside of our control, from poor connectivity, sharing workspaces with families or relatives, and so on. Remote learning has prompted students to take ownership of their learning and take responsibility for what and how they learn. This has been done in a number of ways. For example, educators who provide students with choice, be it working independently or in a group, deciding when the assessment is due or what platforms to use, and so on. This choice increases their motivation and long-lasting learning. Similarly, students perceive level of competence. So this is their understanding of what is expected of them and why, coupled with their belief on what they can coupled with their belief that they can accomplish what is expected. This also influences their motivation to learn. Students may not always make the correct decisions in terms of optimal learning opportunities, so it's important as educators to provide support for good decision-making, learning habits, and accountability. Education during the pandemic has welcomed a large number of additional support systems for students during these difficult months, from both an academic standpoint and otherwise. Finally, cognitive engagement, or students' ability to self-regulate. As well as this, their understanding of learning objectives and the relevance of these learning objectives for their future. This is another aspect of student engagement that is related to better learning outcomes. In order to allow students to continually grow, they need constant feedback and reflection. As previously mentioned, the past number of months has utilised formative assessments, which strongly encourages further learning through feedback and reflection. Student ownership of learning and an improved relationship between students and educators has encouraged student partnership, and it allows students to be more involved in the design of their education and their assessments. This may be as simple as requesting a different due date for an assessment for workload purposes, or contributing to the methods used to deliver the course contents. I'll pass you back to Dylan, who will discuss this in a bit more detail.
I think Miamh has highlighted the importance and the potentials of student partnership there. So I'm going to reinforce this by talking about a need to focus on relationships as we move forward into the next year. When we look at the teaching and learning context in higher education, we have three main components: the students, the teacher, and the content. We can see from this graph the overlap between each content and what happens in each overlap. For us, and what we argue should be at the center of all our teaching and learning, is relationships. And we can see this in the overlap between student and teacher and student. Zooming in, we truly believe relationships to be the key to meaningful engagement in teaching and learning. This is the key, or the cheat code, to meaningful engagement. And we believe if we start here, this is how we can redesign the teaching, learning, and assessment. We share with you our take-home message. MacPhail comments here with regards to teacher education. I suggest the pandemic could profoundly change teacher education for the better, supporting the notion that necessity really is the mother of invention. We believe we can extend MacPhail's comment to all teaching and learning in higher education. This pandemic has provided us with an opportunity, and this is the closest thing we will get to a blank slate with regards to teaching and learning in higher education. From this, we have an opportunity for teachers and students to work together in rethinking, reimagining, and redesigning teaching, learning, and assessment in higher education. Thank you.